Hi, I'm Jay Fallon, and thank you for listening to the Slippery Slope. So, I'm going to do an end of week news wrap up for all of those people that don't get to watch the news, don't keep a track of what's happening throughout the week. I'm just going to go through the week's highlights, talk about what I think is the main events, main news events of the week. What's really important, especially concerning Australians, what's going on. So we've had a pretty big week. It's been pretty interesting. One of the big stories I think has happened is, well, this one for starters, Oracle Homes, which is a building construction company, mainly throughout Queensland and New South Wales. They have gone under. So this has been, one of several construction companies that have gone under recently in Australia. This headline says that Oracle Homes collapse leaves family homeless, but master builders hopeful insurance scheme will help hundreds. So yet again, another construction company going under. Very, very disappointing. Um, you want to this headline here, I think, is probably one of the weirdest ones. I'm going to read actually what came through on Fox News. I saw this headline, or I saw this news article actually last night on the project here in Australia, and I don't know, I don't understand whoever came up with this harebrained idea for a nightclub. I think it's going to go badly for them anyway. So this headline says nightclub bans staring without verbal consent of other persons. So for one, so basically, when I was listening to the news last night, they said, so if you're staring at someone for roughly 3 seconds or more, that's considered, so roughly 3 seconds is considered staring, and it's their policy that you're not allowed to stare and you'll be confronted by a security officer. I'll read a bit more about from this article. It says that an Australian nightclub, it's actually in Sydney, is implementing a policy that bans individuals from staring at each other without prior consent of the person being stared at. Okay, I'd have to ask the question, what's more weird? Going into a room and having someone stare at you for a few seconds, maybe leering at you, giving you a bit of the eye, saying, in their mind, oh, that find that person attractive. Or what's weirder, having that happen or having someone come up to you and ask for consent to stare at you? How do you get prior consent? So anyway, this article goes on to say that Club 77, which is a nightclub located in Sydney's Darlinghurst neighbourhood, posted on its website that it is considered harassment to stare at someone without their consent, and that law enforcement may be called if patrons engage in that behaviour. Okay, Australia's getting weirder, I think. Goes on to say that we operate a zero tolerance policy on harassment of any kind, the club's website said. Club 77 is not a place, sorry, Club 77 is not a place to come if your sole purpose is to pick up. If you do come in and are approaching multiple people or giving unwanted attention to someone, you are going to attract the attention of our security, who have been instructed to stop this kind of behavior. The warning continues, as a nightclub, we encourage you to interact with strangers. However, any engagement must begin with verbal consent. I'll walk over to you. I say, listen, I think you're very attractive. Can I go back here and stare at you for a few seconds? That's a kind of ridiculous thought. Anyway, it goes on. This also applies if you are, for example, staring at someone from afar. If the attention you are giving someone is unwanted, that is considered harassment. The website states that a designated safety officer wearing a pink vest will be tasked with handling complaints and concerns related to the new policy, and offending individuals will be removed from the club. Okay, for one, I think there's not going to be any club in the probably near future, because people are just not going to. It's not the kind of people that go to a club that would conform to this kind of policy where you go up and ask other people for consent before you can look at them, or would adhere to this kind of thing, are not the kind of people who would go to a club to drink and mingle. people just won't go. That's what I think is going to end up happening. I think they're going to just find themselves on the wrong end of this and possibly going out of business anyway. The other thing about this, I love the fact, it says if your sole purpose is to pick up. I mean, I haven't been to nightclubs for a long, long time. Obviously, I'm getting older now. I don't go to nightclubs. But when I was a younger man, if you went to a nightclub, the sole purpose of going to a nightclub was to pick up. If you girls, they went to pick up. Boys went to pick up. Girls went to scope out the talent at nightclubs. So if your sole purpose is to pick up, in my mind, doesn't that just wipe out basically anyone? Anyone? Their sole purpose? I don't know. Okay, another news headline. I just want to read, before I go into this next headline, I want to read to you the definition of socialism. So, socialism is a political and economic theory of social organization which advocates that the means of production, distribution, and exchange should be owned or regulated by the community as a whole. Okay, and if you're asking me, okay, so why are you talking about this, Jason? So what what they want to do now, what the Greens want to do is they're looking for this policy where they restrict how much homeowners can charge in rent. They want to restrict it for 2 years. They want to regulate what homeowners can do. No longer having a free market for rental properties, the government restricts the price that that homeowners can put their rents up. That's what they want to do. In my mind, if the Greens continue along with some of their policies that they want to bring in, we're going to end up being a socialist country. These are they're socialist policies that they're bringing in. The Greens also want to implement, and actually they have implemented in New South Wales, and I believe it's already in Victoria, where if you are a homeowner of more than one home, okay, and they're trying to bring this in South Australia, if you own a home and you own a second home and you do not rent that property out, let's just say you have a beach house, which is your holiday house, but you didn't go there in the last 12 months. They want to force, and they've actually brought this in. I know they brought it in New South Wales, and they have this in Victoria already. They want to enforce that you must rent out your property. You must rent out your property. So because we've had homelessness here in Australia now, and because of the supposed climate emergency, their policies are that they are trying to enforce, and that they are enforcing, is that they can make you rent out your second home, whether you like it or not. To me, it sounds very much like socialism. Now they're talking about controlling the amount of rent that a homeowner can charge. So listen, it feels very much like I said, like socialism. I'll read to you again. It should be so socialism is a political and economic theory of social organization which advocates that the means of production, distribution, and exchange should be owned or regulated by the community as a whole. That's what the Greens are trying to do to Australia. I think we're slipping into a socialist, almost leaning towards a communist kind of style country. And okay, we will probably never be able to be a fully communist country because we have democratic elections. However, socialism, we are on the fast track towards socialism, and the Greens are really kicking us down that track at the moment. Okay, next one. What else can we talk about? The next thing that I wanted to talk about was Scott Morrison. I don't know where, how, what he is doing, where his mind has been at for the last couple of years. However, he's got a few things to answer for. So the first one is Scott Morrison could be hauled before a royal commission into Centrelink's illegal robo-debt scandal as Anthony Albanese announces details of inquiry. Like I said, Scott Morrison, he was in charge of the government while all these issues went on. Uh, with the robo debt, if you're here in Australia, there's a lot of people that suffered wrongfully with the robo debt, and mate, I just think it's a disgrace. But yet again, Scott Morrison in a bit of trouble. Also, Scott Morrison is still having to talk, or having to. It looks like he's going to be dragged before another inquiry. To talk about the ministerial appointments that he'd given himself. So in this headline coming from The Guardian, it says that Scott Morrison secretly appointed to 5 ministries, including Treasury and Home Affairs. So if you don't know what's going on, he appointed himself to these different ministries. He wasn't getting paid extra. It turns out that there wasn't anything illegal about what he did. However, he just didn't tell anyone else. He didn't tell the public. He kept the whole thing secret. It gave him personally a lot of extra powers, and he could have overridden any of these other ministers if he wanted. He only did it in one case, but he could have done it more. He gave the excuse that it was because of the pandemic, which doesn't really, it doesn't really pass the sniff test, because some of the things that the ministries that he took over really had nothing to do with the pandemic, such as I think he had the resource ministries. What's that got to do? I could understand it if it was like when he did with the health ministry, but portfolio. But did he really need to do it in all 5 different ministries? And the main issue is that he didn't tell anyone what he was doing. In true ScoMo fashion, he just did everything on the quiet. And yeah, the fella just continually goes on to disappoint, unfortunately. Yeah, I don't know. I don't even know what else to say about ScoMo. He's just unfortunately, I think he just disappoints more and more. So the last thing that I want to go over, I think, is still here in Taiwan, not here in Taiwan, sorry. What's happening in Taiwan? Obviously, Taiwan and China are still carrying on. China still carrying on like a pork chop, like a spoiled little brat, to be honest. So the Taiwanese opposition politician takes war games concerns to China. So basically, a senior member of Taiwan's main opposition party, I won't even try and say that word, has told a top Chinese official of Taiwanese people's concerns about Beijing's war games near the island, what the party describes as frank talks. So, as I said, we're still seeing all these issues over there in the in between Taiwan and China. The possibility of war, I think, is still very real for this region. So you've got that going on. Nothing much has really changed with Ukraine and Russia. They're still fighting. Russia's still pushing ahead with its, with what it wants to do, what it's trying to implement over there. Ukraine is having some small victories. However, it's still not looking good for them. Australia, our inflation is just, it's crushing a lot of families. I've got to be honest. The issues with ScoMo, former Prime Minister, the Greens seem like they're trying to turn our nation into a socialist country. I don't know what else to say. These are the things that have been affecting us. And then you have silly ideas like what's happening with the nightclub in Sydney, where we now have to get consent before we look at someone else too long. Heaven forbid you see someone that's attractive in a nightclub and you look at them for more than 3 seconds. What is our world coming to? Hey, that's the things that I've seen happening in the last week, the things that I think been the most intriguing. Please, like I said, like and share this page. So this is for all the people who don't get to listen to the podcast during the week, or don't get to see the news during the week at all. Also, with what's happened with the Slippery Slope podcast in the last week, at the end of last week, I had Sel Grover on the program. She is the founder, CEO of the Giggle app. We had a great discussion about Hollywood, her time in Hollywood, her time as a screenwriter, her interactions with some of the or some of the nastier kind of people, I'd say, in Hollywood with sexual assaults and that kind of thing. Also, the things that she's gone through with starting up her app Giggle, being referred to as a TERF, the birthing parent issue. So all of that kind of stuff is a great. It was a great discussion, great talk, great to hear her points of view. Also had Pastor Patrick Russell yesterday. Here's some great information about what's happening in Israel at the moment and how they're being attacked on, basically surrounded and attacked by Iran at the moment. They're facing aggression on all sides at the moment. We also talked about issues like ScoMo, like what's happening with Pastor, the Hillsong pastor, what's his name, Brian Houston, and that kind of thing. And some of the other spiritual issues in the nation and around the world at the moment. And then just also discussing the other news headlines as I normally do. That's what's going on in Australia. That's what I see as some of the most important issues at the moment happening. I want to thank you for listening to The Slippery Slope. Please like and share. If you're on YouTube, subscribe, or any of the other platforms, actually subscribe. It really helps. Thank you for listening to The Slippery Slope.